You eat every day. You've done it since you were born. And yet, somehow, eating has become one of the most confusing things in modern life. 1,000 diets promise truth. 1,000,000 voices claim to know what's best. But behind all the noise, your body is quietly whispering its own language, one you've simply forgotten how to hear. This is the story of that language, and how remembering it can change everything you feel, think, and become. There was a time when food was simple, a time when eating was guided not by labels or apps, but by instinct, hunger, smell, satisfaction, and rest. Today, that instinct is buried under charts, influences, and brightly packaged confusion. People eat not for nourishment, but for comfort, control, identity, or distraction. And the result is a paradox. We know more about nutrition than ever before, yet we've never been more lost about what to eat. Every diet begins with a promise. It began not with a laboratory, but with hunger. For most of human history, eating was not a question of balance or macros, it was a rhythm of survival. People gathered, cooked, and shared what the land offered. Food was connection, to the earth, to seasons, to one another. The body knew when to stop, not because it counted, but because it listened. Then, a few centuries ago, something subtle but world-changing happened. Curiosity turned food into science. When early scientists looked at life, they saw energy. They built furnaces, burned wood, and measured heat. One day, someone asked, "What if the body works the same way?" Food became fuel, and the calorie was born, a small unit meant to describe life in numbers. It sounded logical, even beautiful. Eat a certain amount, burn a certain amount, stay alive. But beneath that logic, a dangerous illusion formed, that the complexity of life could be reduced to arithmetic. The 19th century brought the birth of nutrition as an official science. Researchers separated food into parts, protein, fat, carbohydrate, and gave each a function. Vitamins were discovered later, each lettered like secret keys to vitality: A, B, C, D, E. For the first time, humanity could fight disease with knowledge instead of chance. Scurvy, rickets, goiter, all began to disappear. It was a golden age of discovery. Yet in this victory, something human was lost. The meal stopped being a story and became an equation. The orange was no longer sunlight and juice, it was 45 milligrams of ascorbic acid. The loaf of bread was no longer harvest and heat, it was 80 grams of carbohydrate. Food, once sacred, became a science project. By the early 1900s, factories learned to copy nature. Margarine replaced butter, canned soups replaced kitchens, and refined became a symbol of progress. Nutrition science, proud of its power, helped justify this shift. If you could fortify a cereal with vitamins, why bother with the field it came from? The system began feeding itself. Agriculture turned industrial, and the supermarket was born, a temple of options that slowly disconnected people from their instincts. Then came war, and with war, rations. Governments realized food could be controlled, measured, and standardized for millions. Scientists were called to design efficient meals that kept soldiers strong and citizens satisfied. Out of this came the first national guidelines, the first food pyramids, and the first illusion of authority over appetite. Nutrition was no longer personal, it was policy. When peace returned, abundance followed. Factories that once produced rations now produced snacks. The science that once served survival now served marketing. Bright boxes declared, now with vitamin D, low in fat, high energy. Nutrition, meant to liberate health, was quietly captured by commerce. We began to eat what the market could explain, not what the body desired. The mid-century decades deepened this confusion. Studies suggested that fat caused heart disease, and panic spread faster than evidence. Newspapers simplified the science, politicians amplified it. Butter was out, sugar was in. To make fat-free foods taste good, manufacturers added sweetness and starch. Weight loss culture was born, millions counting, fearing, punishing themselves in the name of health. Ironically, as we cut fat, waistlines grew. As we gained products labeled light, our lives grew heavy with guilt and contradiction. Underneath this cultural storm, a quieter truth was being ignored. Nutrition was never meant to be a battlefield of nutrients. The body does not experience carbohydrate or protein, it experiences harmony, the interaction of fiber slowing sugar, fat carrying flavor, enzymes unlocking vitamins. When science studied these parts in isolation, it missed the orchestra. And when industry saw profit in that isolation, the noise became endless. Each decade crowned a new villain: fat, sugar, gluten, carbs. Each promised redemption through a new rule. The real casualty was trust. People stopped believing in their own hunger. They began believing in numbers. We counted calories instead of sensations, weighed food instead of noticing pleasure, and turned meals into moral tests. A good day meant discipline. A bad day meant failure. We forgot that nourishment was never supposed to feel like shame. The irony deepens when you look back at why nutrition science began. It wasn't born from vanity, it was born from compassion, a desire to understand why people suffered, to prevent disease, to make life longer. But over time, curiosity was replaced by competition. Every discovery became a product, every disagreement became a brand, and the consumer, standing in fluorescent aisles of conflicting advice, felt smaller and smaller. The modern diet industry thrives on that confusion. It sells certainty to those who've lost instinct. It promises shortcuts to those who've lost time. And behind the glowing screens of wellness influencers lies the same old question that started it all. What keeps a human being alive? Only now, the answers are sponsored. Yet, in the quiet corners of research, a new generation of scientists began to rebel, not against knowledge, but against its misuse. They looked again at traditional diets, at communities untouched by industrial food. They noticed something obvious. Longevity came not from rules, but from rhythm. Meals were social, ingredients were whole, portions were guided by need, not fear. There were no superfoods, only ordinary ones eaten with consistency and joy. This realization began to stitch the story back together. The goal was no longer to isolate nutrients, but to understand relationships, how stress affects digestion, how sleep affects metabolism, how emotion affects choice. Nutrition was returning to its origin, the human experience. If you listen closely, you can hear that return happening now. People are learning to cook again, to grow again, to eat slowly. Scientists are mapping the microbiome, showing that health begins in the invisible forests of our gut. Doctors are rethinking calories, realizing that not all energy burns the same way. The circle is closing, not perfectly, but hopefully. Still, we carry the scars of reductionism. It takes time to unlearn decades of instruction. Many still believe health lives in a supplement bottle or a macro ratio. But as one researcher quietly said, the best diet is the one your body already knows how to follow, if only you'd stop interrupting it. So where did nutrition science lose its way? Perhaps the answer is simple. It stopped asking questions of life and started asking questions of control. It tried to master nature instead of collaborate with it. But every system that forgets its origin eventually finds a mirror, and that mirror is the human body itself, still speaking in the same language it always has: hunger, satisfaction, balance, fatigue, and renewal. To return to that language is to return to truth. Science is not the enemy of intuition, it's the tool that should refine it. The tragedy was never knowledge, it was arrogance. The next chapter in nutrition's story will not be about discovering new molecules, but about remembering old wisdom. And as we move forward, we must ask, if the past built a system that separated us from our instincts, can the future build one that brings them back together? The answer begins, as it always has, at the simplest of places: the next meal in front of you. Before food reaches your stomach, it passes through your mind. Every bite begins as a thought, a whisper of emotion disguised as hunger. You might believe you eat because you're hungry, but often you eat because you're human. And being human means feeling, stress, joy, loneliness, reward. The plate is simply where those feelings go to rest. We live in an age where food is everywhere, yet meaning is thin. The average person makes more than 200 food decisions a day, most unconsciously. You open the fridge not because you need energy, but because you need comfort, distraction, or proof that something is still within your control. Hunger and habit blend into a single impulse. Something must fill the empty space. Psychologists call it emotional substitution. When life feels uncertain, the brain reaches for something immediate. Food is safe, legal, and reliable. Sugar, salt, and fat trigger small explosions of dopamine, the brain's quiet applause. For a moment, anxiety fades. You don't feel full, you feel soothed. But like any applause, the sound dies quickly, and silence returns louder than before. The roots of this reflex go back far beyond supermarkets. In early evolution, food meant survival. Sweetness signaled safety, bitterness warned of poison. The body learned to celebrate pleasure as a promise of life. Modern abundance hijacks that ancient reward system. We no longer forage, we scroll. The reward button is always within reach, and every press teaches the brain that emotion can be eaten. The first taste of comfort food often begins in childhood. A scraped knee met with a cookie, a birthday wrapped in cake, a bad grade softened by ice cream. Without meaning to, love became edible. The brain remembers. Sugar equals care. Decades later, when stress hits, the same pattern wakes up. You're not chasing calories, you're chasing warmth. The spoon becomes a time machine. But comfort eating isn't just about sadness, it's also about celebration. We eat to mark beginnings and endings, to connect and to forget. Food carries emotion like a vessel. That's why no nutrition label can measure satisfaction. It's not chemical, it's psychological. You can eat a perfect meal and still feel empty if what you wanted was peace. Craving itself is a language. It's not random, it's coded communication between body and brain. A craving for crunch might signal stress, the jaw's way of releasing tension. A longing for chocolate might mean magnesium deficiency, or simply the memory of childhood calm. When you start to decode cravings instead of fearing them, they transform from enemies into messages. The question shifts from "how do I stop eating this?" to "what is this feeling asking for?" There's also the rhythm of reward. The human brain learns through loops: cue, action, reward, repeat. Each loop carved into neural pathways like grooves in a record. Stress triggers the cue, the action is reaching for food, and the reward is relief. Over time, the loop becomes automatic. You don't choose it, it chooses you. Breaking it requires not willpower, but awareness. You can't erase a loop you refuse to see. That's why diets fail when they ignore emotion. They treat hunger as a math problem, but hunger lives in the nervous system, not a spreadsheet. When you restrict food without healing feeling, the brain simply finds another way to shout. Sometimes it binges, sometimes it numbs. Either way, the real hunger for rest, love, safety remains unsatisfied. Scientists have traced part of this pattern to stress hormones. When cortisol rises, appetite shifts toward quick fuel, sugar and fat. The body believes it's preparing for danger. Ironically, the modern danger is invisible: deadlines, screens, noise. The body doesn't know the difference, it simply obeys chemistry. The more chronic the stress, the more urgent the craving. You're not weak, you're wired. Another player is dopamine anticipation. The brain releases dopamine not after eating, but before, in the moment of expectation. That's why thinking about pizza can feel almost as good as eating it. Modern marketing exploits this beautifully. Ads, smells, even colors trigger dopamine spikes long before digestion begins. Desire is engineered to arrive faster than satisfaction. The system profits from that gap. But satisfaction, real satisfaction, operates on another level. It begins with presence. When you slow down enough to notice taste, texture, temperature, your brain receives closure. The meal feels complete, not endless. Studies show mindful eaters consume less but enjoy more. The difference isn't discipline, it's attention. Awareness digests faster than willpower. There's also a social layer. Humans are herd eaters. We mirror one another unconsciously. You eat faster when your companion does. You snack because others are snacking. Shared meals regulate emotion as much as they provide nutrients. Loneliness, by contrast, distorts appetite. Some people lose it, others chase it endlessly. The fork becomes conversation in a silent room. Then there's identity. Food tells stories about who we think we are: vegan, paleo, clean, indulgent, disciplined. Each label carries pride and pressure. When eating becomes moral, guilt follows every deviation. You don't just eat badly, you are bad. That shame drives secrecy, secrecy drives compulsion, and the cycle tightens. Healing begins when food stops being a confession and returns to being nourishment. Understanding the psychology of eating isn't about rejecting emotion. It's about welcoming it. Hunger, after all, is emotional by nature. It reminds you that you're alive, that you need, that you connect. When you eat with awareness, emotion integrates instead of rules. The meal becomes dialogue, not escape. So how do we reclaim that? Not through another rule, but through curiosity. Pause before you eat and ask, what am I actually hungry for? Sometimes the answer is food. Sometimes it's rest, sunlight, laughter, or human touch. When you meet the real need, the false appetite softens. The craving loses its urgency because it has been heard. It helps to remember emotions are temporary, but habits are patient. Every small act of mindful eating rewrites a pattern. Each time you breathe before biting, you remind the brain that safety exists outside of sugar. Over weeks, the nervous system learns a new truth. Peace can come without consumption. Even science now circles back to this ancient wisdom. Brain imaging studies reveal that mindful eating reduces activation in reward centers associated with binge behavior. Therapists teach urge surfing, noticing craving as a wave that rises, peaks, and falls. You don't fight it, you ride it until it fades. The power lies not in control, but in observation. There's a deeper irony here. For decades, we blamed ourselves for lack of willpower. In reality, the system was designed to keep us craving. From marketing jingles to processed textures engineered for the perfect crunch, everything is built to override natural stop signals. Awareness, therefore, becomes rebellion, the quiet act of choosing consciousness in a world built on impulse. So next time you find yourself standing before the fridge at midnight, remember, you're not weak, you're searching. And that search is the most human thing of all. What matters is how you listen to it. If you listen with judgment, it grows louder. If you listen with curiosity, it begins to speak in full sentences. It tells you when it's tired, when it's lonely, when it simply wants to feel alive again. The psychology of eating, at its heart, is the psychology of being seen by yourself. Once you understand that every craving carries meaning, the fight ends. You stop treating appetite as an enemy and start seeing it as guidance. You learn to feed the body without starving the soul. And that realization leads us to the next chapter, a deeper one still. Because if the mind drives hunger, what drives the mind? To answer that, we must step inside the body's own communication network, the subtle biological conversation that began long before psychology had a name. Power didn't appear the moment one human struck another. It began the moment someone realized they could prevent the strike. The first true act of power wasn't violence, it was restraint, paired with the ability to decide when and how that restraint would be used. From that decision, everything we now call politics, leadership, or authority quietly began. In early human life, power was simple. Whoever could protect others survived longer. The strongest hunter, the most experienced tracker, the elder who remembered the old paths, all became natural centers of influence. They didn't rule, they guided, and those who followed them did so willingly, because protection and direction were forms of safety. In a dangerous world, trusting someone stronger was an act of survival. But over time, something shifted. When danger passed, those leaders didn't fade away, they stayed. Their authority began to extend beyond the battlefield, beyond the hunt, into daily life. They decided who married whom, who ate first, who spoke in council. Gradually, protection turned into possession. The line between guardian and ruler dissolved, and humanity's first invisible contract was written: obedience in exchange for security. This was the true birth of power, not in weapons, but in the belief that some people had the right to decide for others. That belief, once accepted, spread faster than any empire. It made kings possible, priests necessary, and empires inevitable. To understand why people accepted this arrangement, we have to look inward. Human beings crave certainty even more than freedom. Freedom, after all, means risk, choice, responsibility. Certainty promises safety, structure, and predictability. The illusion that someone else knows what to do. And so societies willingly traded autonomy for order. They didn't lose control, they outsourced it. In every age, power has hidden behind purpose. Ancient rulers claimed divine guidance. Medieval monarchs promised divine right. Modern governments claim legitimacy through law. Each system tells the same story. Obey us, and we'll keep chaos away. It's a fairy tale that works because chaos terrifies us more than tyranny. The first civilizations built temples as much for power as for prayer. Those grand stones weren't just offerings to gods, they were proof of human hierarchy. The same hands that laid bricks in devotion also built walls that divided classes. Religion gave power moral shape. Power gave religion stability. Together, they built a world where control could be justified not by force, but by faith. But power's genius lies in subtlety. A good ruler doesn't just command obedience, they make obedience feel voluntary. That's why symbols became so crucial. Crowns, thrones, flags, rituals. They didn't force loyalty, they inspired it. When people believe in authority, they no longer need to be coerced. They police themselves, defend the system that limits them, and call it loyalty. You can see echoes of this even today. When people line up for elections, follow laws, salute flags, they're participating in a story older than any nation. The story says, your safety depends on this structure. And maybe it does. The question isn't whether power is bad, it's whether we still understand the exchange we're making. Throughout history, there have been rare moments when people challenged that exchange. Revolutions, uprisings, reforms. Each time, humanity tried to rewrite the terms of power. And each time, the same pattern emerged. Freedom gained, chaos followed, new authority rose. Power doesn't vanish, it changes form. Like water, it fills whatever shape society gives it. Consider the ancient city-states of Mesopotamia. At first, they were small communities governed by councils of elders. But when floods came or enemies attacked, they appointed one person to lead. When the crisis ended, that leader refused to step down, and people didn't make him. The need for stability outweighed the desire for equality. Thus, the first kings were crowned not out of greed, but gratitude. And from that gratitude grew systems too heavy to question. That's the irony of civilization. Every structure that protects us also limits us. Laws prevent chaos, but also bind behavior. Hierarchies maintain order, but also freeze opportunity. Power isn't inherently evil. It's simply the organization of fear. The more fearful a society becomes, the more power concentrates at the top. Even in personal life, this pattern repeats. Families, companies, communities all operate on implicit hierarchies. The parent decides for the child, the manager for the worker, the teacher for the student. In each case, the assumption is that guidance equals safety, and in most cases it does, until the one in power forgets their purpose and begins to rule for comfort, not for protection. That's when power curdles. It no longer serves, it feeds. It stops being about survival and becomes about permanence, the instinct not to lead, but to stay leading. Every empire, every regime, every dynasty eventually faces this moment, the moment where power's original purpose, Safety is replaced by fear of losing power itself. So what began as a tool for survival becomes the very source of conflict. Leaders cling to control, followers cling to safety, and the world spins back into the cycle of domination and rebellion. Power births resistance, and resistance in turn births new power. The first rulers understood something we often forget, that control doesn't come from force, but from belief. The mightiest weapon ever invented was not the sword or the gun. It was the idea that obedience is natural, and that idea still shapes us. But to truly see how power sustains itself, we must look into the mind of its most loyal accomplice, the human need for enemies. Because power, like fire, cannot exist in calm. It needs friction. It needs opposition to justify its existence. So the next step in understanding this world is not asking who holds power, but who needs an enemy to keep it. Before appetite became a matter of image, it was a matter of existence. Long before grocery stores, menus, or portion control, hunger was the body's most reliable alarm, a call to move, to seek, to live another day. Every craving that now feels inconvenient once kept our ancestors alive. To understand why we eat the way we do, we must step backward through time, to when appetite was not vanity, but instinct. Imagine a world where food is never guaranteed. The early human wakes before dawn, stomach tight, not from anxiety, but from biology's reminder, energy is running low. That discomfort fuels action. Hunger releases hormones that sharpen attention, quicken reflexes, heighten smell. It's not punishment, it's precision. The body transforms need into focus. Every bite found in that environment meant survival, not excess. In those ancient rhythms, there were no 3 meals a day. Eating was opportunistic, small, irregular, dependent on season and luck. The human metabolism evolved to endure scarcity. When food was available, the body stored energy. When it wasn't, it used fat reserves. This elegant alternation between feast and famine created metabolic flexibility, a trait we now spend millions trying to replicate through fasting trends that echo what nature already taught us. Appetite itself was never constant. It was guided by environment. Sweetness signaled ripe fruit, rich in calories before winter. Salt hinted at hydration and mineral balance. Fat meant concentrated energy, vital for endurance. Bitter flavors warned of poison. Evolution rewarded those who listened and punished those who ignored. Over thousands of generations, taste became a map of survival written across the tongue. Fast forward to today, those same survival instincts now exist in a world where abundance never ends. The alarm system still rings, but there is no danger to escape, only aisles of temptation. The craving for sweetness, once rare and precious, is now endless and cheap. Biology designed us for scarcity, the supermarket designs us for indulgence. The mismatch is not moral failure, it's evolutionary inertia. The body has not updated its software to modern times. When you taste sugar, dopamine fires as if you found a fruit tree after famine. When you eat salt, it celebrates hydration after heat. When you chew fat, it rewards safety before another long journey. None of this is vanity. It's ancient design trying to navigate a world that no longer speaks the same language. Consider also how movement once shaped appetite. To find food, you had to walk, climb, dig, carry. Hunger and effort were inseparable. Exercise came first, reward followed. Now, effort is optional. We can summon calories with a click. And so the relationship reverses. We eat first, move later, if at all. The natural feedback loop between hunger and exertion collapses, and appetite loses calibration. Even beauty, as we now measure it, was once survival language. A well-fed body signaled health. Symmetry suggested genetic stability. These cues evolved long before media turned them into standards. Our ancestors sought visible health. Modern culture calls it attractiveness. The function stayed the same, only the motive changed. Inside every cell, ancient programs still run. Ghrelin rises before meals. Leptin lowers it afterward. Insulin regulates energy flow. Dopamine rewards successful foraging. The brain's hypothalamus monitors it all, like a conductor ensuring harmony. But constant external noise, lights, screens, stress, keeps the orchestra off beat. When you eat while distracted, signals delay. When you chronically diet, the brain interprets famine. It slows metabolism, increases cravings, and stores fat more aggressively. The system isn't broken, it's just doing its job, protecting you from starvation that never comes. The modern obsession with control, weighing, counting, measuring, confuses this ancient intelligence. For millions of years, appetite was self-regulating. When you burned more, you hungered more. When you rested, you needed less. It worked without numbers. The attempt to outsmart biology has led to the opposite of freedom: anxiety disguised as discipline. We built systems to manage hunger instead of understanding it. Even emotional eating traces back to survival logic. In dangerous times, food meant safety. To eat was to pause, to signal the threat has passed. That's why comfort food calms us. It's the body's way of recreating security. The trouble arises when stress never ends. The alarm stays on, the appetite stays open, and eating becomes continuous self-soothing. The body, once guided by nature, becomes trapped by emotion. But understanding this doesn't condemn us, it frees us. The cravings you battle are not flaws, they're fossils. They remind you of how far your species has come. Every urge for sweetness, warmth, or fullness is an echo of a life once lived close to the earth. Awareness transforms those echoes into insight. When you recognize hunger as communication, not command, you reclaim choice without shame. This is why modern nutrition must stop moralizing appetite. The body is not greedy, it is ancient. It has no idea you live near refrigerators. It still believes winter is coming. Compassion begins when you stop treating your biology like an enemy. Feed it with respect, not rebellion. Move it, not to punish, but to complete the circle it was designed for. Perhaps the secret isn't to silence appetite, but to realign it, to let biology do what it has always done, protect life, not appearance. Because appetite's purpose was never to sculpt bodies, it was to sustain species. Every signal of hunger is the body's small reminder that survival still matters, even in a world that forgot what survival feels like. And as we move deeper into this exploration, we arrive at the question modern science has struggled to answer. If appetite evolved for survival, how did we turn it into self-criticism? The answer lies in what happened next, when the idea of the perfect diet began to seduce the modern mind. Everyone wants the answer, the single plan, the chart that promises balance, longevity, and control. Every decade invents its new prophet: low fat, low carb, paleo, keto, vegan, intermittent. Each claims to reveal the law that governs every human body. Yet the quiet truth has never changed. There is no perfect diet. There never was. Biology refuses uniformity. Even identical twins metabolize food differently. Genes influence how efficiently enzymes break down starch, caffeine, or lactose. Microbes in the gut determine whether fiber heals or bloats. Climate, ancestry, and rhythm of life carve their own fingerprints into appetite. To demand one universal rule is to ask the ocean to stay still. The fantasy of the perfect diet was born from good intention. Scientists sought order amid chaos, something measurable in a world of taste and emotion. Calories gave them mathematics. Nutrient ratios gave them structure. Diet books translated that structure into commandments. Eat this, avoid that, weigh everything. The problem wasn't precision, it was assumption. They mistook averages for absolutes. The human body is an ecosystem, not a formula. In one person, carbohydrates fuel clarity. In another, they summon fatigue. One thrives on plant proteins. Another needs the density of animal fat to feel stable. The difference is not moral, it's mechanical. Your metabolism is a conversation between genetics and environment, constantly adjusting to stress, sleep, temperature, and movement. The perfect diet today might exhaust you tomorrow because life itself never holds still. Still, the promise of perfection sells. It comforts the anxious eater. In a world of uncertainty, it offers rules that feel like safety. Follow this plan, it whispers, and your body will obey. But obedience is not health, it is surrender. When you outsource awareness to an ideology, you stop listening to feedback from your own biology. You begin to treat food like faith, defending it, preaching it, fearing apostasy. The social layer deepens the illusion. Communities form around diets, complete with heroes, villains, and rituals. Success stories flood timelines, hiding silent struggles behind filters. Someone loses weight, glows online, and becomes proof of concept. Yet behind the image often lies exhaustion, anxiety, or metabolic collapse. The human body adapts beautifully for a while, but adaptation is not balance. Our obsession with right eating stems partly from how culture equates discipline with virtue. We admire restraint more than self-understanding. We call moderation weakness and extremes commitment. The body becomes a moral project rather than a living system. You don't eat to live, you live to maintain the performance of control. When hunger rises, guilt follows, as though biology were betrayal. But nature doesn't punish variation, it relies on it. Diversity keeps species resilient. The same principle protects human nutrition. Where one person's body converts beta-carotene efficiently, another depends on preformed vitamin A. Where some digest dairy easily, others lack the enzyme to do so. Every population evolved alongside its landscape, the Inuit with fat, the Okinawans with vegetables, the Maasai with milk and blood. Each found health within context, not conformity. Modern globalization erased those borders while keeping the instincts. We now have mangoes in winter and salmon in the desert, yet our biology still expects seasonal rhythm. The gut microbiome changes with local produce, daylight, and temperature. When that cycle breaks, internal clocks lose synchronization. The body whispers, "Where am I?" and we answer with supplements. Even psychology shifts metabolism. Studies show that believing a meal is indulgent changes hormonal response compared to believing it is healthy, even when the food is identical. Expectation shapes chemistry. The perfect diet ignores that mind. It measures intake, but not meaning. Yet digestion begins in perception, the smell, the story, the anticipation of nourishment. To escape this trap, you must trade ideology for intimacy. Instead of asking, "What's the best diet?" ask, "What is my body telling me now?" Track energy, mood, sleep, digestion, not to control them, but to understand them. Patterns emerge when punishment stops. The foods that harmonize with your system reveal themselves quietly, without evangelism. Science now confirms what wisdom traditions always knew. Personalization matters. Nutrigenomics, microbiome mapping, glucose monitoring all reveal variability once invisible. Two people eating the same meal can experience entirely different blood sugar curves. Technology finally admits what intuition always sensed. One size was never more than a slogan. Yet freedom does not mean chaos. Principles remain. Whole foods over processed, balance over extremes, rhythm over rigidity. Within those boundaries lies infinite individuality. Your perfect diet is not a destination, but a dialogue, one that we were taught to treat food like math. A calorie in, a calorie out, the perfect balance sheet. It sounds neat, logical, comforting, the kind of simplicity we crave in a world of chaos. But the body doesn't run on arithmetic, it runs on alchemy. Every bite you take becomes part of a living equation that no calculator can solve, because the variables, hormones, emotions, microbiome, metabolism, sleep, are alive, changing every hour. The calorie was never invented for biology. It was born in physics in the 19th century when scientists burned food in sealed chambers to measure its heat. That heat became a number, a universal code for energy. Useful, yes, but crude. The body doesn't burn food in a chamber, it transforms it through chemistry. It turns a banana into serotonin, a seed into cell membranes, protein into emotion and repair. A number can't capture that transformation. Yet we built our understanding of eating around those numbers. Weight loss became accounting, nutrition turned into budgeting. Eat less, move more, the most repeated advice in human history. And for a while it seemed to work. Cut calories, lose weight. But what we rarely asked was, what kind of calories? From what source? In what body? Under what stress? Two people can eat the same meal, say 500 calories of pasta, and experience completely different outcomes. One burns it calmly, the other stores it as fat. The difference isn't discipline, it's chemistry. Hormones decide how energy is used or saved. Insulin, cortisol, thyroid, leptin, these invisible messengers shape metabolism far more than math does. When you live in constant stress, cortisol rises, blood sugar stays high, and fat storage increases, even if your calorie intake is modest. When you sleep poorly, hunger hormones surge, cravings intensify, and your body conserves energy as if famine is near. Calorie count can't measure any of that. It can't measure how emotion alters digestion or how joy improves absorption. Even digestion itself changes the math. Raw vegetables and cooked vegetables have different energy availability. Protein requires more energy to digest than fat. Fiber subtracts calories by feeding gut microbes instead of you. The label on a package is an estimate, not a law. The number says 200, but your body may only access 140. Food is not fuel in a tank, it's dialogue with chemistry. This is why calorie restriction often fails long-term. When the brain senses scarcity, metabolism slows to protect survival. The body becomes efficient, conserving energy instead of burning it. It's not rebellion, it's memory. For millions of years, famine meant danger. Your body is still wired to keep you alive, not thin. When you eat too little for too long, thyroid hormones drop, reproductive systems pause, mood declines. The mind may call it discipline, the body calls it emergency. Then, when food returns, it stores aggressively, the rebound we blame on ourselves instead of biology. True nourishment begins when you stop fighting the system that's trying to protect you. The goal isn't to manipulate numbers, but to understand signals. Energy balance is real, but it's dynamic, not static. What matters is how the body interprets energy, not just how much you consume. A 500-calorie meal can act like 700 or 300, depending on stress, sleep, and microbiome composition. Think of your metabolism like a conversation between chemistry and context. The same bite of bread behaves differently on a morning walk than during midnight scrolling. The more aligned your environment, the smoother that conversation becomes. Metabolic truth lives in relationship, not isolation. That's why modern nutrition is shifting focus from calorie load to metabolic response. Continuous glucose monitors reveal how personal those responses are. Some people spike after rice, others after bread. The body decides, not the label. It listens to chemistry, not arithmetic. So what should replace calorie counting? Attention, awareness, quality over quantity, whole foods over numbers. Choose meals that require chewing, that calm you instead of inflaming you. The body reads chemistry before it reads calories. It reacts to fiber, antioxidants, amino acids, and real texture, the signals evolution recognizes as food, not formula. You can't outsmart metabolism, but you can cooperate with it. Feed it consistently. Sleep deeply, move naturally, and let hormones recalibrate. When chemistry trusts you, the numbers follow on their own. Because here's the quiet truth. The body never cared about perfection. It cared about stability. Numbers can't measure the peace that comes from eating without fear. Calories may count energy, but chemistry defines life. And to see how that chemistry unfolds, we move next into its building blocks, the macronutrients themselves, to learn how protein, fat, and carbohydrates were never enemies, only misunderstood allies in the same intricate design. For decades, we've been told to choose sides, to fear fat, to worship protein, to question every carbohydrate. Nutrition became a battlefield, with each macronutrient wearing a label: hero, villain, suspect. But the body doesn't see enemies. It sees ingredients in harmony, each performing a role so old and interwoven that removing one disturbs the rhythm of the whole. Every living cell on Earth runs on this trio: protein, fat, and carbohydrate. They are not trends, they are the alphabet of life. To understand them is to understand how your body actually stays alive, moment by moment, quietly converting matter into motion and motion back into matter again. Let's begin with protein, the builder. It's the scaffolding of everything you are: muscles, enzymes, hormones, skin, even emotion. When you move, think, or repair, protein is there, not as a supplement, but as a substance of self. Each molecule of protein contains amino acids, small links that fold into shapes more complex than any architecture on Earth. They build tissues and also messages. Some amino acids become serotonin, others become dopamine. What you eat literally becomes what you feel. But protein isn't just about strength, it's about timing. The body doesn't store it like fat, so supply must be steady. Too little and your metabolism slows. Too much and your kidneys whisper for mercy. The balance lives not in grams, but in awareness. How often you move, how much stress you carry, how well you rest. Your protein needs are not fixed numbers. They are living variables that shift with life's weight and pace. Now consider fat, the misunderstood friend. Once blamed for every disease, fat was exiled from plates for nearly half a century. Yet the human brain is 60% fat. Every nerve that sends a signal, every hormone that keeps mood stable, every cell membrane that guards against chaos, all made from fat. It cushions organs, stores vitamins, fuels endurance, and even keeps you warm. The real danger was never fat itself, but the kind we created, hydrogenated, processed, stripped of nature's balance. Natural fats from nuts, seeds, avocados, fish, eggs, and olive oil act like slow-burning candles. They keep the flame of energy steady. Industrial fats, by contrast, are like sparks, unstable, inflammatory, easily oxidized. When inflammation rises, the body feels under siege. But when fat is pure and whole, inflammation quiets, hormones stabilize, and energy evens out. Fat also speaks the language of satisfaction. It slows digestion, letting fullness catch up to appetite. This is why a salad without dressing feels empty, and a meal with healthy fat feels grounding. To eat without fat is to invite constant hunger, because the body never receives the signal that the meal is complete. And then are carbohydrates, the misunderstood fuel. They are nature's instant energy, the sunlight stored in plants. In fruits, roots, grains, and honey, carbohydrates feed not just muscles, but moods. The brain alone consumes about 20% of your daily energy, and it prefers glucose, the simplest sugar. That doesn't mean sugar itself is the problem, it's the context. In nature, carbohydrates arrive surrounded by fiber, water, and micronutrients, built-in brakes that slow absorption. In industry, we stripped those brakes away, leaving only speed. The result is a roller coaster energy, spikes, crashes, cravings. The solution isn't elimination, but restoration. Bring fiber back, bring slowness back. A baked sweet potato, an apple, or oats speak to your metabolism in the calm rhythm it understands. Each macronutrient has a rhythm, and your body conducts them like music. Protein stabilizes, fat sustains, carbohydrates ignite. Remove one and the song falters. Eat them together in balance and the body performs effortlessly. A meal of rice with vegetables feels light but fades quickly. Add olive oil and beans and you feel anchored. That's synergy, chemistry collaborating beyond arithmetic. When diets declare one macronutrient guilty, they divide a system built to cooperate. Low-fat diets once made us tired and moody. Low-carb diets made us anxious and wired. High-protein plans gave temporary satisfaction but strained systems not built for access. The truth has always been in the middle, not compromise, but cooperation. Even the way you combine them changes everything. Fat slows carbohydrate digestion, preventing glucose spikes. Protein amplifies satiety hormones, calming hunger after eating. Carbohydrates assist in transporting amino acids into muscle. What science calls macronutrient interaction, the body simply calls balance. Metabolism loves rhythm more than restriction. Morning might call for carbohydrates and protein, fuel for movement and thought. Evening asks for fat and light protein, repair and rest. There's no perfection here, only awareness, matching input with need, not ideology. Remember also the psychology attached to these nutrients. We call carbohydrates comfort, protein discipline, and fat danger. But those words belong to culture, not chemistry. The body feels none of that shame. It only knows supply and demand. The real question isn't which macronutrient to eat, but how to restore their conversation. If you want to understand how this trio truly works, picture a fire. Carbohydrates are the kindling, quick to catch, quick to fade. Fat is the log, slow, steady, warm. Protein is the structure of the fire itself, the stones that shape the flame and hold its form. Too much kindling burns out fast. Too many logs smother the air. The art is in the mix. When balance returns, everything else follows. Energy, mood, clarity. You stop micromanaging macros and start feeling patterns. You'll notice when you need density, when you crave lightness, when warmth calls for fat and movement calls for fuel. This is not control, it's communication. Because ultimately, macronutrients aren't categories, they're companions. The body's wisdom was never built on fear, but on harmony. The same harmony that let our ancestors thrive on whatever their land gave them. Grain in the east, olive oil in the south, fish in the north, tubers in the tropics. Different combinations, same intelligence. Survival through diversity. Understanding this dissolves the war on food. There are no villains at your table, only misunderstood allies waiting to be used wisely. When you eat in cooperation, not opposition, nutrition stops being a struggle and becomes what it was meant to be, a rhythm of life. And to deepen that rhythm, we turn next to the subtler forces within food, the ones too small to see yet powerful enough to sustain every heartbeat and every thought, the micronutrients, the invisible architects of vitality. If macronutrients are the body's orchestra, micronutrients are the invisible hands that tune every instrument. They don't play loudly, but without them, no music would happen. They are measured not in grams, but in whispers, milligrams, micrograms, tiny sparks that ignite the machinery of life. And yet it's often the smallest pieces that hold everything together. In the beginning, nutrition science saw food as fuel. Later, it learned that fuel isn't enough. The engine needs sparks, switches, and conductors. That's where micronutrients entered the story. Vitamins and minerals don't give energy directly, but they allow energy to exist at all. Every breath, every thought, every movement passes through their invisible gates. Take vitamin C. Just a few hundred years ago, sailors lost their lives not to battle, but to deficiency. Their gums bled, wounds refused to heal, and strength vanished. The cure was simple, citrus fruit, but the lesson was vast. Absence can be more dangerous than excess. Health is not about more, it's about enough. Vitamins are organic, meaning they come from life, plants, animals, sunlight. Minerals are inorganic, pulled from earth and sea, iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium. Together, they form the alphabet of vitality. Without iron, blood cannot carry oxygen. Without magnesium, muscles cannot relax. Without zinc, wounds linger. Without iodine, the thyroid falls silent. These are not trivia points, they are the foundations of presence. Modern life, however, runs on abundance that hides deficiency. We eat more than ever, yet lack the essentials that make energy usable. Processed food often loses vitamins through refining and heat. So we live in a paradox: full stomachs, starving cells. It's not visible at first. You don't collapse. You just fade. A little fatigue here, a slower recovery there. The body whispers before it screams. Each micronutrient tells its own story. Vitamin D, made from sunlight, speaks to bones, mood, and immunity. Its absence can feel like winter even in summer. Vitamin Bs drive metabolism and nerve function. They turn food into focus. Calcium builds structure, but also conducts rhythm. Every heartbeat depends on it. Magnesium is nature's calm, regulating hundreds of enzymes, balancing energy, helping the body rest after stress. Selenium, though rare, protects cells from the slow burn of oxidation. Each plays a note in the grand chord of well-being, and when one goes missing, the whole body subtly detunes. We often imagine vitamins as separate from real food: small pills, colorful capsules, neat solutions. But isolated nutrients behave differently than when they live inside their natural context. An orange contains not just vitamin C, but flavonoids that help it work. Spinach offers iron, but it's absorbed best when paired with vitamin C-rich foods. Nature never intended nutrients to travel alone. It designed them to collaborate. This is why balance is more than moderation, it's architecture. Too much of one nutrient can silence another. Excess zinc can block copper. Too much calcium can hinder magnesium. The body doesn't like extremes, it thrives in ratios. When diet becomes a contest of more, deficiency often hides behind abundance. The relationship between mind and micronutrients is just as profound. Low iron can mimic depression. Magnesium deficiency can feel like anxiety. Low B12 may cloud memory, while lack of folate can drain mood. These are not just physical shortages, they are emotional echoes of imbalance. When chemistry falters, perception shifts. The world looks dimmer not because of mindset, but because the body's electrical circuits are underpowered. The quiet beauty of micronutrients is their humility. They don't demand attention. You can't feel them enter, yet their absence can unravel everything. They remind us that strength lies not in volume, but in precision. A single milligram can decide between fatigue and vitality, between dullness and clarity. And yet, despite their importance, obsession can be as harmful as ignorance. Oversupplementation is the modern shadow of deficiency. More is not always better. Sometimes it's simply wasteful, sometimes toxic. Fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K accumulate in tissues, and imbalance can tip into harm. The aim is sufficiency, enough to sustain, never so much to burden. To restore micronutrient balance, the solution is not complicated. Eat color. Every shade on your plate represents a spectrum of nutrients. Red for antioxidants, green for chlorophyll and magnesium, orange for carotenoids, purple for polyphenols. Diversity is protection. Where variety exists, deficiency cannot hide. The soil beneath our food also matters. Minerals come from earth. If the soil is depleted, so are we. This is the hidden link between ecology and nutrition. A tired planet creates tired people. Choosing foods grown in rich soil, supporting local produce, or even tending a small garden, these are acts of self-preservation disguised as lifestyle choices. There's also rhythm in intake. Some nutrients prefer morning, vitamin D with breakfast, B vitamins with energy-demanding hours. Others belong to evening, magnesium, zinc, quiet helpers for repair and rest. When timing aligns with biology, absorption improves. The body recognizes not just what you give it, but when. In a deeper sense, micronutrients symbolize something larger, the truth that wholeness depends on the unseen. We chase grand solutions and forget the small consistencies that keep us alive. Health doesn't hinge on a single discovery, but on millions of tiny corrections happening quietly every day. So perhaps the missing pieces of modern nutrition aren't just vitamins and minerals, they're humility and attention. The humility to know that life is built from small things, and the attention to notice when the body speaks softly before it begins to shout. When you eat with that awareness, choosing variety, respecting balance, trusting simplicity, the body begins to hum again. You may not see the change, but you'll feel it. Steadier moods, deeper sleep, calmer energy. This is what true nourishment feels like, not a burst, but a balance. And with that understanding, we can now move deeper into the invisible universe inside us, where food meets microbes and the smallest organisms determine the largest truths about health. Inside you lives an entire world, a vast city of life so dense and active that, by cell count, you are more microbial than human. Trillions of organisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses move, communicate, and cooperate inside your gut every moment. They don't just digest food, they guide immunity, mood, metabolism, even decision-making. The body is not a single being, but a community, and your health is the harmony of that community. The microbiome began forming the moment you were born. If you came through natural birth, your first breath carried bacteria from your mother's body, a gift of inheritance more vital than any possession. Those microbes trained your immune system, teaching it what to protect and what to ignore. If you were born by C-section, your first inhabitants came instead from the air and the hospital environment. Neither path is wrong, but each writes a different opening chapter in the story of your gut. Over time, every meal, every place, every breath adds characters to that story. The microbes thrive on what you feed them, but they don't eat what you eat. They eat what you don't digest. Fiber, polyphenols, resistant starch, these become their fuel. In return, they craft molecules that heal your intestinal lining, calm inflammation, and even whisper to your brain through the vagus nerve. It's an ancient friendship, forged long before we could name it. But modern life strains that friendship. Processed foods, antibiotics, artificial sweeteners, and chronic stress thin the diversity of the microbiome. Imagine a rainforest where only a few species survive. Less life, less resilience. The same happens inside the gut. When one type of bacteria overgrows and others disappear, digestion weakens, mood shifts, and immunity falters. You may not feel sick, but you feel off, bloated, foggy, tired for no clear reason. That's imbalance speaking. Scientists once believed the gut's role was mechanical: break down food, absorb nutrients, pass waste along. Now we know it's neurological, immunological, and emotional. 90% of serotonin, the happiness molecule, is made in the intestines. Gut bacteria influence its production by sending biochemical signals that tell your brain how safe or stressed the body feels. When the gut is inflamed, those messages turn dark. You may think your sadness is psychological, when in truth, it's biological. Immunity, too, depends on this invisible network. 70% of immune cells reside in the gut, watching what passes through, learning from it. The microbiome trains them to distinguish friend from foe. A healthy gut builds tolerance, a disrupted one overreacts. This is why autoimmune diseases and allergies often trace back to microbial imbalance. The immune system isn't broken, it's confused by silence where diversity once spoke. Even hunger has roots in this world. Certain bacteria thrive on sugar and can manipulate cravings by releasing chemical messengers that nudge the brain towards sweet foods. When you crave something, it may be your microbes asking for their next meal. The good news is that you can retrain them. Change what you feed them for a few weeks and the community rearranges itself. You are not a prisoner of craving. You are its landlord. Food, then, becomes less about you and more about us, the shared life inside. When you eat fiber-rich vegetables, whole grains, fermented foods, you're not just nourishing yourself, you're funding your internal ecosystem. Yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, these are not trends, they are ancestral agreements to keep microbial allies close. Each spoonful carries species that reseed diversity, building resilience from within. Stress, on the other hand, acts like a wildfire in this ecosystem. When cortisol stays high, gut motility changes, blood flow shifts, and protective mucus thins. Beneficial bacteria retreat while opportunistic ones flourish. That's why chronic stress so often appears as digestive trouble. The gut listens to emotion and mirrors it physically. Meditation, deep breathing, time in nature, these aren't just mental health tools, they're microbial medicine. Antibiotics, miraculous as they are, also leave scars. A single course can erase decades of microbial balance. The body often recovers, but not always fully. This is where prebiotics, the fibers that feed good bacteria, and probiotics, the live bacteria themselves, can help. But supplements are only as effective as the environment they enter. Think of them as seeds. Without soil, sunlight, and water, in this case whole foods and calm rhythm, they can't grow. Microbial diversity thrives on diversity of experience. Different foods, different environments, even exposure to soil, pets, and other humans strengthen it. The sterile perfection of modern life, sanitized, packaged, filtered, protects us from disease, but also from resilience. The immune system needs practice. Children who play outdoors, adults who garden or eat unprocessed food carry richer microbiomes and often calmer immune systems. This is why travel can sometimes upset the stomach. Your microbes meet strangers, negotiate boundaries, and learn. Over time, this negotiation strengthens the system. But constant travel or ultra-processed diets can also exhaust them. The goal isn't exposure or restriction, it's rhythm. Feed your microbes, rest them, challenge them gently, and they will protect you in return. The microbiome also interacts with metabolism in subtle ways. Certain bacteria extract more calories from food than others. Two people eating the same meal can absorb different amounts of energy based on their gut flora. Some microbes enhance fat storage, others improve glucose tolerance. Weight gain or fatigue, therefore, may have less to do with willpower and more to do with which organisms are calling the shots inside you. Think of this world as a mirror of the outer one. Diversity equals stability. Balance equals peace. Destruction equals fragility. When the internal ecosystem thrives, inflammation calms, energy rises, and thought clears. You feel at home inside yourself. Healing the microbiome doesn't require perfection, just consistency. Add color to your plate. Choose foods that once lived in soil or water. Include fermented dishes, fiber, and time between meals for digestion to rest. Hydrate generously. Bacteria need water too. Most of all, live with awareness. Stress less, sleep more, move often. The gut loves gentle routine. The revolution in understanding this hidden world is still unfolding, but one truth already stands firm. You are not alone inside your body. Health is cooperation. Every decision you make, every bite, every breath, every moment of calm shapes not just you, but an entire civilization of life that sustains you. And now that we've explored how those invisible allies sustain your energy and emotions, we turn to another quiet symphony inside you, the hormonal one, where chemistry becomes communication and balance becomes the language of every feeling you have. Every day you make thousands of small decisions: when to eat, how much to eat, what to reach for when you're tired or sad. Most feel like choices, but they're not. Behind them plays a quiet orchestra, 4 hormones, mostly invisible, softly shaping your behavior. Their names are insulin, cortisol, leptin, and ghrelin. Together, they keep you alive. But in the modern world, they've been forced to play a song they were never designed to perform. The story begins with insulin, the gatekeeper of energy. Every time you eat, glucose rises in your blood. Insulin's job is to escort that glucose into your cells, turning it into usable power. For most of human history, this dance was flawless. Food came in waves, the body stored some, burned some, and rested. But now the waves never stop. Snacks, screens, stress, constant cues for constant insulin. The gates never close. Over time, cells stop listening, forcing insulin to shout louder. This is how resistance begins, not as failure, but fatigue. The body grows deaf to its own messenger. When insulin's rhythm falters, energy becomes uneven. You eat but feel tired. You crave sugar, not for pleasure, but for clarity. Every high followed by a crash, every crash followed by a hunger that feels emotional but is chemical. It's not lack of will, it's a hormone trying to fix imbalance through behavior. You eat because the body believes it's still starving. Now enter cortisol, the conductor of stress. Cortisol doesn't care about goals, it cares about survival. When danger appears, a predator, a deadline, a notification, cortisol floods your blood, freeing sugar for quick energy. In ancient times, this was brilliance. You escaped, you fought, and levels dropped again. But modern life offers no escape. The threat never ends, so cortisol never rests. Constant cortisol keeps blood sugar high, pressures insulin to work overtime, and gradually erodes balance. You might notice it as restlessness, midnight cravings, or the need to eat while working. Stress blurs hunger signals, turning the act of eating into self-soothing. This is why comfort food feels safe. Biochemically, it is. Each bite calms cortisol for a moment, whispering, "You survived." But the quiet doesn't last. the cycle restarts. Chronic stress rewires biology. You live in fight or feed mode. Then come the voices of leptin and ghrelin, the partners that manage appetite. Ghrelin, made in the stomach, announces hunger. Leptin, produced by fat cells, signals fullness. When you eat well, they balance each other like tides. Hunger rises, food arrives, satisfaction follows, and both hormones rest. But under chronic stress and insulin chaos, that harmony breaks. High insulin blocks leptin's message, so fullness never arrives. You can eat a full meal and still feel empty, not because you need more, but because your brain didn't get the memo. Meanwhile, sleep deprivation boosts ghrelin, telling you you're hungrier than you are. After a few nights of poor rest, food looks brighter, smells stronger, and feels like relief. You eat not from need, but from hormonal illusion. Together, these four create a cycle that drives modern exhaustion. Insulin spikes from constant eating, cortisol spikes from constant worry, leptin's message fades, ghrelin grows louder. You end up chasing energy through food when what you truly need is rhythm, consistent sleep, gentle movement, calm pauses. But the body, even when overwhelmed, is patient. It adapts, waits, listens. The same hormones that can trap you can also heal you. When insulin finally gets space between meals, sensitivity returns. When cortisol drops through rest or slow breathing, hunger stabilizes. When leptin and ghrelin realign through better sleep and nourishment, you rediscover natural appetite. The miracle isn't in supplements or superfoods, it's in restoring tempo. Food timing matters more than we realized. When you eat in daylight, insulin follows the sun, strong, responsive, aligned with the body's circadian rhythm. Eat late at night and it stumbles. Glucose lingers, storage increases. The body's hormonal instruments tune themselves to light and dark. To eat well is to eat with the clock, not against it. Exercise, too, plays its quiet part in this symphony. Gentle movement improves insulin sensitivity. It helps cortisol release rather than accumulate. Walking after meals tells the body, we are using this energy, you can relax. Sleep then completes the concert, resetting ghrelin and restoring leptin's voice. The next day, hunger feels calmer, cravings quieter. It's easy to mistake these hormonal patterns for personality, like I'm lazy, I'm addicted, I can't focus. But biology precedes behavior. The hormones don't judge, they adjust. They learned from millennia of scarcity and danger. They still think you're running from lions, not from emails. Understanding them turns guilt into clarity. To live in balance is to become a better conductor. Feed insulin slowly, with fiber, fat, and calm. Soften cortisol through rest and breath. Respect leptin by pausing after meals, by sleeping deeply. Answer ghrelin, not with fear, but with nourishment that truly satisfies. When these signals align, the noise fades. You no longer crave constantly or crash suddenly. Your appetite begins to match your need. Food stops being a negotiation and becomes what it always was, communication. This is the hormonal symphony at its best. Subtle, precise, self-correcting. Every note working to one goal, equilibrium. And as we continue, we'll explore the next player in this orchestra, time itself, and how the body's internal clock, the quiet rhythm beneath every heartbeat, determines how you digest, store, and even think about food. Your body keeps time even when you don't. Beneath thought and choice, a silent metronome ticks inside every cell, a rhythm older than humanity itself. It tells your heart when to rest, your liver when to detox, your stomach when to digest, your brain when to dream. You don't hear it, but you live by it. This is your circadian rhythm, the metabolic clock that quietly rules your health. For most of history, our ancestors ate, moved, and slept in sync with light. Dawn meant foraging, midday meant energy, dusk meant rest. The body adapted to this pattern, building cycles around sunlight and darkness. The digestive system learned to be active when the sun was high, and to rest when it set. Hormones like insulin, melatonin, and cortisol danced in sequence with these natural cues. But in the modern world, the sun has lost its authority. Screens burn through the night, meals stretch past midnight, alarms drag us up before we're ready. The clock is still ticking, but it's confused. This confusion is called circadian misalignment, and it's quietly reshaping modern health. When you eat at irregular hours, your internal organs receive mixed signals. The liver, which expects fasting at night, is forced to digest late meals instead. Insulin, which rises easily during the day, struggles in darkness. The result? More fat storage, slower digestion, foggy mornings, restless sleep. The rhythm hasn't broken, it's just out of tune. You can feel this dissonance after a single late-night snack. Sleep feels shallow, dreams restless, wake up sluggish, craving caffeine and sugar. The pattern continues, exhaustion by afternoon, hunger by evening, and each repetition teaches your body the wrong rhythm. In time, metabolism drifts out of sync, not because of what you eat, but when. Every cell has its own clock, but they all take cues from the master clock, a cluster of neurons in the brain's hypothalamus that responds to light. This is why sunlight in the morning matters more than any supplement. It resets your system, reminding your body, this is day. Cortisol rises gently to wake you, digestion gears up, temperature climbs. In darkness, melatonin rises, metabolism slows, repair begins. To ignore this is to work against your design. Science now shows that meal timing may influence health as much as meal content. When you eat within a consistent window, typically 8 to 12 hours of the day, your body operates efficiently. Outside that window, it struggles. This is the logic behind time-restricted eating, though the principle is ancient. It's not fasting for punishment, it's fasting for alignment. The body digests best in daylight and restores best in rest. Sleep is the other half of this clock. While you rest, the body performs housekeeping, balancing hormones, repairing cells, consolidating memory. Lack of sleep throws this system into chaos. Cortisol rises too early, insulin sensitivity drops, hunger hormones surge. After just one sleepless night, the body behaves as if it were in mild starvation. You crave sugar not for energy, but for chemical reassurance. The next day's decisions aren't laziness, they're hormonal compensation. Even small adjustments can reset the system. Morning light within an hour of waking, regular meal times, a digital sunset, dim screens, and bright ideas fade together. Avoiding heavy food 2 to 3 hours before bed. These are not rules, they are reminders. The body is mechanical only in rhythm, not in rigidity. It doesn't need perfection, it needs predictability. Movement also speaks to the clock. Morning exercise boosts cortisol and energy. Evening walks calm insulin and aid digestion. The body loves gentle patterns more than intense interruptions. In rhythm, it thrives. In randomness, it tires. There's poetry in realizing that you and the Earth share the same beat. As the planet spins, your cells hum in response. The sunrise wakes your metabolism. The sunset cools it. When you eat, sleep, and move with that flow, you borrow power from nature's precision. When you resist it, you spend your own energy trying to recreate what already exists freely. Every diet begins with hope, a clean slate, a promise of control, a quiet vow to finally be better. You feel powerful at first, lighter even before the change begins. You measure, plan, delete, deny. For a while it works. The body obeys. The number drops. The mirror softens. But somewhere along the way, a familiar unease returns. Hunger grows louder. Focus drifts. Emotion sharpens. The plan that once felt like freedom now feels like prison. And that's when the rebound begins, not as failure, but as biology reclaiming its voice. Restriction is seductive because it feels moral. To say no becomes a sign of strength. To indulge becomes weakness. Culture rewards the stoic, not the satisfied. But the human body was never designed to be managed through denial. It doesn't understand virtue, only survival. When you restrict, the body doesn't feel proud of your discipline, it feels afraid. It doesn't see a diet, it sees a famine. And fear is the most powerful appetite stimulant known to nature. The moment you begin to deprive yourself, hormones respond. Leptin drops, signaling scarcity. Ghrelin rises, amplifying hunger. Metabolism slows to conserve energy. Cortisol increases to help you stay alert in case you need to find food. This is the body's ancient logic. Hunger means danger. What you interpret as self-control, it interprets as threat. That's why the harder you fight your appetite, the louder it becomes. You can suppress it for days or weeks, but the body will always push back. Not because you're weak, because you're alive. Evolution chose survival over ambition. That's why no diet built on punishment can last. You may win the battle of weeks, but biology always wins the war of years. The psychological weight of restriction goes deeper than hunger. It fragments your relationship with food. Instead of a friend, food becomes an opponent, something to resist, to fear, to manipulate. Meals become math, not meaning. Pleasure becomes guilt, and guilt becomes habit. You start to think not in flavors but in numbers. Even joy becomes portion-controlled. What's more, restriction narrows your world. It demands constant attention, counting, checking, worrying. Energy that could be spent living is spent managing. You may look healthy on the outside, but feel hollow inside. This is the invisible cost of willpower, the slow erosion of spontaneity. When every choice is a test, eating stops being human and becomes mechanical. There's also a paradox at play. The more you restrict, the more you obsess. Thought follows deprivation. If you tell yourself not to think about chocolate, you think about chocolate. Every act of suppression magnifies the desire. This is not lack of discipline, it's how the brain works. The mind doesn't process negation, it processes focus. What you fight, you feed. This is why binging so often follows strict control. After weeks of denial, the first bite of forbidden food floods the brain with relief. Dopamine surges, not from the taste itself, but from the collapse of tension. The binge isn't gluttony, it's exhale. It's the body saying, finally, safety. But that relief turns quickly to shame, and shame renews restriction. Thus, the cycle continues. Willpower, exhaustion, relapse, guilt. A pendulum swinging between control and chaos. Breaking that cycle begins with understanding its roots. Restriction isn't about food, it's about fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. We project those fears onto the plate because it's a space we can manage. But control is never the same as peace. You can control everything you eat and still feel starved for calm. To heal, the language of eating must shift from punishment to permission. Permission does not mean excess, it means trust. When you trust your body, moderation emerges naturally. The first step is to stop labeling food as good or bad. There is only fit or misfit. Does it serve your energy, your mood, your moment? Eat for function, not morality. It helps to reintroduce pleasure consciously. Slow down. Taste again. Let texture, scent, and warmth remind you why food matters. Pleasure is not the enemy of discipline, it's its balance. Without joy, restraint becomes resentment, and resentment eventually becomes rebellion. Allowing yourself satisfaction rewires reward circuits that years of guilt have dulled. Biology supports this too. When you eat with calm and gratitude, parasympathetic nerves activate, digestion improves, absorption increases. You actually need less food to feel full. When you eat in fear or haste, cortisol rises, digestion stalls, cravings intensify. The body listens not just to what you eat, but to how you eat. True willpower, then, is not the ability to deny yourself. Food is never just food. It is memory, belonging, and belief served on a plate. Every culture builds its identity around what it eats, how it eats, and with whom. The taste of home, the smell of childhood, the rhythm of a family meal, these are not simply habits. They are languages of love and survival. But somewhere between tradition and trend, that language has been rewritten. Today, our food tells a story, not always our own, but one we've been taught to repeat. In every culture, eating once carried ritual. Bread was broken together, not counted alone. Recipes were inherited, not invented. They carried geography in their flavor, the salt of the coast, the spice of the desert, the earth of the mountain. To cook was to remember where you came from. Even famine had recipes, stews that stretched what little was left, rituals that honored what could not be wasted. Food was identity, humble, proud, collective. Then came modernization, migration, and marketing. The global kitchen exploded. You could eat sushi in Paris, pizza in Delhi, noodles in New York. At first, this felt like freedom, the world on your plate. But with globalization came something subtler, the slow erosion of cultural anchors. Traditional diets that evolved over centuries, Mediterranean, Okinawan, Ethiopian, balanced health and heritage through local wisdom. They were not designed, they were discovered. When those systems collided with industrial convenience, something precious dissolved. Advertising stepped into that vacuum, offering a new kind of identity, the consumer kind. It whispered, "You are what you buy." Fast food became rebellion, diet food became virtue, coffee chains became community. The marketplace turned nourishment into branding. Meals became marketing moments, not memories. A burger was no longer meat and bread, it was lifestyle. A smoothie was not fruit, it was self-improvement in a cup. What was once cultural pride became consumer pressure. We began eating for image instead of instinct, for social approval instead of satisfaction, for belonging, not balance. And the body, ancient and honest, struggled to keep up with this artificial evolution. Traditions had once taught patience, slow cooking, shared meals, gratitude before eating. Marketing teaches speed. Grab, go, repeat. Convenience replaced ceremony. The result is not just nutritional decline, but emotional one. We no longer eat to connect, we eat to continue, to stay awake, to keep moving, to fill the silence. Yet even within this noise, tradition still whispers. The dishes of your childhood hold a truth no advertising can mimic. A grandmother's soup, a festival sweet, a local spice, these carry emotional nutrition. When you eat them, your nervous system softens. It recognizes safety, familiarity, memory. This is why comfort food exists in every culture, not because it's perfect, but because it's personal. Food beliefs also carry morality. Some cultures see abundance as blessing, others see restraint as virtue. In some, meat is sacred. In others, it's forbidden. None are right or wrong. They are reflections of story. They reveal what each society values: strength, purity, compassion, balance. The danger arises when these beliefs harden into judgment, when one way becomes the way and other traditions are labeled inferior. Nutrition, stripped of context, becomes ideology.
Modern diet culture borrows the language of morality from religion. Clean, guilt-free, sinful, detox. Words that once belonged to spirit now control the plate. They create quiet shame around pleasure, hierarchy around habits. But food is not confession. It does not make you pure or impure. It only makes you alive.
Marketing understands this tension and feeds on it. It studies your insecurities, your aspirations, your fears. It sells you solutions disguised as snacks. It uses nostalgia to make you trust, rebellion to make you buy, fear to make you stay loyal. A product becomes a personality trait. You're not just drinking coffee, you're that kind of person. You're not eating plant-based, you're better. The goal is not nourishment, but narrative. Yet culture can also heal this divide. Around the world, communities are returning to their roots, reviving lost grains, forgotten recipes, slow food movements. They are remembering that tradition is not the opposite of progress, it's its foundation. To eat what your ancestors ate is not regression, it's reconnection. It's remembering the balance they found before science had names for it. Food traditions also teach inclusivity. In many cultures, meals are built to share. Portions are fluid, plates communal. Eating together levels hierarchy. It reminds us that hunger makes everyone equal. That shared act may be the oldest medicine against loneliness. Studies now show what elders always knew. People who eat in company live longer, digest better, and feel less anxious. The table heals more than the stomach. Still, we must navigate modernity with awareness. You can't unsee marketing, but you can see through it. The next time you're drawn to a label promising clean or super, pause and ask, who told me this story and why? Real food rarely needs a campaign. It speaks for itself in scent, texture, and satisfaction. It belongs to land, not logo. Rebuilding identity through. If food is culture and belief, then diets are commerce. They sell the illusion of control to a world that feels uncontrollable. Every new year brings another promise. This plan will finally work. Each one arrives with glossy covers, sleek branding, smiling faces. They look different on the outside, but beneath the slogans, they sell the same thing: hope. Hope that the body can be mastered, that guilt can be erased, that certainty can be bought.
The diet industry thrives not on health, but on insecurity. It doesn't need you to fail completely. It just needs you to feel unfinished. It survives in the space between effort and exhaustion. That moment where you've tried everything yet still feel wrong. It whispers, "This one will be different." And for a short while it is. Not because the method is new, but because belief is powerful. Belief alone can change biology, for a time. But belief fades, hunger returns, and the cycle restarts. To understand this business, you have to see how it learned to weaponize confusion. Nutrition science evolves constantly, and the industry moves faster than evidence. A single small study can become a global trend before the ink dries. Headlines shout, "Sugar is poison," or "Fat is back," or "Carbs are the culprit." The message changes, but the outcome stays the same: uncertainty. When you're confused, you seek authority, and where there's demand for guidance, there's profit. The marketing is subtle, even benevolent on the surface. We just want to help you be your best self. But beneath the kindness lies an economy built on churn. If one diet truly worked for everyone, the market would collapse. Sustainability is bad for business. Relapse is the business model. The same companies that sell detox teas will later sell recovery snacks. The same influencers who promote fasting will launch supplement lines to survive the fast. It's an endless loop of solutions creating new problems to solve.
Numbers help sell the illusion of control. Calories, macros, points, steps, visible metrics that offer comfort in their precision. They make health feel measurable, but the body doesn't live in numbers, it lives in nuance. Still, counting creates dependency, and dependency guarantees attention. That's why most diet apps are designed like games: rewards, streaks, notifications. You're not losing weight, you're being trained. The screen becomes your conscience, and every beep reinforces the idea that you can't be trusted without it. The industry also knows how to adapt to your rebellion. When people began rejecting the word diet, it rebranded itself. Now it's wellness, clean eating, lifestyle reset. The rules softened, but the control remained. Perfection, once sold through calorie charts, is now sold through moral language. You're no longer dieting, you're detoxing, cleansing, elevating. The product changed clothes, not purpose. Behind the glossy surface lies a powerful supply chain. Billion-dollar corporations fund independent studies, lobby governments for labeling laws, and own dozens of competing brands to capture every demographic. One sells indulgence, another sells restriction, both owned by the same parent company. They profit from both the binge and the guilt that follows it. The line between food and marketing blurs so completely that even honesty becomes strategy. Real ingredients, no artificial nonsense, non-GMO, buzzwords that trade meaning for emotion. Influencers amplify this machine. Their role is not to educate, but to embody aspiration. Perfect lighting, lean bodies, humble captions about balance. They are the modern saints of self-control. Their followers imitate rituals, not principles. Drinking what they drink, avoiding what they avoid, mistaking mimicry for mastery. Yet these figures are often products themselves, paid to perform authenticity. You're not following advice, you're consuming advertisement disguised as identity. The real tragedy is how this system turns human instinct into revenue. Hunger becomes a flaw to fix, fullness a mistake, and emotion a marketing opportunity. Even recovery gets monetized. There are now programs to help you heal your relationship with food for a subscription fee. The industry that created the wound sells the bandage. But the system wouldn't survive without our participation. It feeds on collective impatience. Real health is slow, rhythmic, unglamorous. It requires listening, not shopping. Yet slowness doesn't trend, so we buy urgency. 7-day resets, 10-day cleanses, 12-week transformations. They promise speed, but what they really deliver is repetition. You start again, and again, and again, always almost there, never quite done. What's lost in this loop is trust, the quiet understanding that your body already knows what it needs. Diet culture replaces that wisdom with algorithms, and algorithms with anxiety. You no longer eat because you're hungry, you eat because your tracker allows it. You no longer rest because you're tired, you rest because an app reminds you. In chasing control, you outsource it entirely. And yet, the solution doesn't lie in rejecting structure altogether. The answer: there are hungers that begin in the body and others that begin in the heart. The first is physical, slow, rhythmic. The second is sudden, a sharp pull behind the chest, a need to fill something that isn't quite empty, yet somehow aches. This is emotional hunger, the quiet survival instinct that has nothing to do with nutrients and everything to do with safety. In modern life, it's hard to tell the two apart. We eat not just because we're hungry, but because we're anxious, tired, lonely, overstimulated, or numb. We eat to celebrate, to comfort, to distract, to forget. Somewhere along the way, food became a language for every feeling we were never taught to name. The body and the mind share the same wires. Stress starts in thought, but it travels through digestion. When anxiety rises, cortisol and adrenaline prepare the body to fight or flee. Blood leaves the stomach, moving to the muscles. Digestion slows, but appetite doesn't disappear. It transforms. The brain craves quick energy, sugar, starch, salt, fat, the ancient fuels for survival. So even as your stomach tightens, your hand reaches for something sweet or crunchy. The craving is not weakness, it's wiring. This is why stress eating feels both soothing and shameful. The comfort is real. Sugar and fat trigger dopamine and serotonin, calming the nervous system for a moment. The problem isn't the relief, it's the brevity. The peace fades before the guilt arrives, and the guilt renews the stress that started it. You eat to quiet the mind, but the silence never lasts. Loneliness deepens this cycle. Humans are wired for connection. Isolation registers as danger. The brain interprets it as physical pain. Eating, especially eating pleasurable high-calorie foods, temporarily eases that signal. For a few minutes, warmth replaces absence. It's not about the food, it's about the mimicry of belonging. The spoon becomes a surrogate hug. The modern world makes this worse. We live in a state of low-grade emergency. Constant notifications, background noise, endless expectations. There is little time for pause, and so food becomes the pause. A coffee break, a late-night snack, a dessert after work. These are the only breaths in days that never stop moving. Food becomes the easiest form of rest, and soon it becomes the only one. But emotional eating is not a flaw to erase, it is communication. Every craving carries a message: I'm tired, I'm lonely, I need comfort, I need to slow down. The goal is not to silence it, but to translate it. Ask before the bite, what do I really need right now? Sometimes the answer is food. Sometimes it's water, sunlight, stillness, touch. The body often uses appetite to get your attention. Awareness interrupts the cycle. When you can name the feeling, you soften its hold. I'm anxious, I'm bored, I'm sad. Those sentences bring emotion from the body into language, and once it's named, it no longer needs to shout. You can breathe, pause, and choose differently, not perfectly, just consciously. There is also a physiological loop at play. Chronic stress lowers leptin and raises ghrelin, the hunger and fullness hormones. It means that during periods of anxiety, you may literally feel hungrier. The body isn't tricking you, it's preparing for threat. Over time, this rewiring becomes habitual. You begin to associate safety with eating. The solution then is not stricter control, but new forms of safety. Slow breathing, genuine rest, supportive connection. One of the gentlest ways to break this pattern is to eat with emotion instead of against it. If you're sad, eat slowly. Let yourself taste, notice, breathe. If you want comfort, make it deliberate. Prepare something warm, sit down, turn off noise. When the act becomes conscious, it loses its compulsion. You are not escaping, you are caring, and that small distinction changes everything. Another truth, stress rarely lives alone. It breeds fatigue, self-criticism, and the illusion that you must earn rest. But rest is not a luxury, it's metabolism's language of trust. When you rest deeply, sleep, breathe, stretch, walk, cortisol lowers, insulin stabilizes, hunger signals recalibrate. You no longer crave to compensate, you eat to nourish. Emotional eating often fades when emotional expression returns. The more you speak, connect, and allow yourself to feel, the less food needs to carry that weight. The body only holds what the heart cannot. Still, forgiveness is part of the process. There will be nights when stress wins, when the fridge becomes therapy. That's okay. Healing doesn't mean perfection, it means awareness without punishment. If you can wake the next morning and simply notice, not judge, you're already free. Because shame fuels the very cycle you're trying to escape. In truth, the relationship between food and emotion has always been sacred. We eat at weddings and funerals, on holidays and heartbreaks. Food is woven into the fabric of feeling. The goal isn't to separate the two, but to restore balance, to let food express joy, not suppress pain. When the world feels heavy, remember, eating is not the enemy of healing. It's often the first language through which the body asks for gentleness. The task is to answer in kind. And as we move forward, we step into the next truth that completes this picture. How movement itself, not as punishment, but as conversation, repairs this connection between mind and body, teaching us to use energy instead of store it. There's a quiet misunderstanding at the heart of modern fitness. The idea that movement is something you owe your body, not something you share with it. For many, exercise has become repayment for eating, a negotiation for worth, a ritual of guilt disguised as discipline. But movement was never meant to punish. It was meant to remind. To remind the body of its strength, the lungs of their freedom, the mind of its rhythm. Before there were treadmills, there was walking, to hunt, to gather, to wander. Before gyms, there were fields, rivers, forests. Movement was life, not lifestyle. You didn't run to burn, you ran to belong, to nature, to the tribe, to your own heartbeat. The modern world has turned that instinct into instruction. Burn fat, earn rest, close your rings. The metrics drown out the meaning. But your body doesn't care about metrics. It listens to emotion. It moves best not from pressure but from pleasure. A walk after dinner, a stretch before sleep, a dance in the kitchen. These feed your metabolism as deeply as any structured workout. Because metabolism isn't a machine, it's a mood. It mirrors your relationship with energy, how freely you give and receive it. When movement feels like punishment, your body resists. When it feels like celebration, it responds. Science supports what the soul already knows. The body burns differently when it feels safe. Under stress, cortisol rises, slowing fat oxidation and increasing inflammation. Under joy, endorphins and dopamine enhance oxygen flow and energy use. It's not just how much you move, it's how you feel while moving. A run driven by shame drains. A walk fueled by curiosity restores. Movement also trains more than muscles. It trains awareness. Every step, breath, and stretch is feedback. When you move mindfully, you learn your body's language. Tension that means worry, stiffness that means fear, fatigue that means silence. Exercise becomes therapy without words. The body processes what the mind avoids. That's why people cry during yoga or feel peace after a long hike. Emotion leaves through motion. Yet modern fitness culture rarely allows gentleness. It glorifies exhaustion. No pain, no gain. Push harder. Never quit. These slogans may build athletes, but they break civilians. Most people don't need intensity. They need intimacy to reconnect with a body they've been at war with. The truth is, consistency beats intensity. A gentle daily rhythm outlasts any heroic effort. The metabolism loves rhythm. It thrives on routine movement, even in small doses. 10 minutes of walking every few hours can regulate blood sugar better than one long workout. Simple strength work preserves muscle, which sustains metabolism even in rest. Gentle stretching tells the nervous system we're safe. Over time, safety becomes energy. The body no longer clings to calories out of fear. It trusts that motion will return. The misconception that exercise burns off food is one of the most damaging myths in health culture. You can't outrun biology. A muffin doesn't require miles to deserve digestion. Movement doesn't erase eating, it enhances it. It helps nutrients reach cells, improves insulin sensitivity, and clears metabolic byproducts. Exercise is partnership, not punishment. There's also a deeper psychological layer. When movement is framed as debt, the act of rest becomes built. But when it's framed as dialogue, rest becomes part of training. Muscles repair in stillness, bones strengthen in recovery. Sleep after movement is when growth occurs. Every inhale expands, every exhale restores. Together they form balance, the real fitness. For those who've spent years treating exercise as atonement, beginning again requires softness. Start with curiosity, not control. Ask, what kind of movement feels like kindness right now? Some days it will be intensity, sweat, strength, speed. Other days it will be stillness, walking, breathing, stretching. Neither is right or wrong, both are listening. The key is sustainability. The body doesn't crave perfection, it craves predictability. Regular, joyful motion, even in 10-minute intervals, reshapes everything. Mitochondria multiply, muscles signal hormones, insulin stabilizes, inflammation falls. You feel lighter, not because of loss, but because of flow. Movement also restores mental order. When the body moves, the mind follows. Exercise increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a chemical that repairs neural connections. That's why ideas often appear during runs, walks, or chores. The brain, like the body, needs circulation. Motion oxygenates thought. The cultural pressure to work out often kills the very instinct it seeks to nurture. Children move naturally. They jump, run, spin, fall, laugh. Adults schedule it, measure it, dread it. The goal is to reclaim that childlike spontaneity, to let movement be play again. Joy is more metabolically efficient than fear. If you want to heal your relationship with exercise, stop asking, how many calories did I burn? And start asking, how do I feel after? The answer tells you everything. Exhaustion means imbalance. Calm alertness means alignment. Metabolism, after all, is not just the process of burning food, it's the process of becoming alive. Every heartbeat, every breath, every motion is transformation. Chemistry turning into energy, potential turning into presence. To move, then, is to participate in your own vitality. Movement is not what you do after you've eaten too much, it's what reminds you that you exist. It clears the fog, softens the mind, strengthens the self. It is how the body prays without words. And when you see it that way, the question shifts from how hard should I work out to how gently can I listen? Because once you listen, you'll find that your body doesn't want punishment, it wants participation. It wants you present. And from that presence grows something deeper than fitness, resilience. The quiet power to adapt, recover, and move forward, not just in exercise, but in life. Next, we move into that very quality, resilience, and explore how the body rebuilds after breakdown, why recovery is the real secret to longevity, and how rest, nourishment, and rhythm together create lasting strength. There are places in the world where time seems to move differently, not slower, but softer. People live long, not because they chase youth, but because they never fight age. In these places, Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Loma Linda in California, the rhythm of eating isn't about diets or discipline, it's about connection, community, and calm. These blue zones, as researchers call them, hold a quiet secret. Longevity is not built by perfection, but by pattern. At first glance, their diets appear simple. Vegetables, beans, whole grains, fruit, herbs, modest portions of fish or meat. No superfoods, no supplements, no fads. But the power lies in how these foods are eaten. Slowly, socially, seasonally. Meals are part of the day's story, not interruptions in it. Food here is not just sustenance, it's ceremony. In Okinawa, elders begin each meal with the phrase "hara hachibu," which means eat until you're 80% full. It's not about counting calories, it's about respect for the body, for hunger, for balance. That last 20% is the difference between surviving and thriving. The Okinawans' plates are colorful: purple sweet potatoes, tofu, green vegetables, seaweed and miso, rich in fiber and antioxidants, but also rich in mindfulness. They eat what grows around them, and they move naturally after eating. The result is not a diet, it's harmony. In Sardinia, life unfolds among mountains and olive groves. Meals are built around beans, bread made from whole grains, garden vegetables, and generous olive oil. Meat is rare, wine is homemade, and laughter is constant. Sardinians don't eat quickly, they gather. The pace of the meal slows the pace of aging. Digestion improves, stress lowers, and bonds strengthen. 3 invisible ingredients that extend life more than any nutrient ever could. In Icaria, the Greek island where people forget to die, it has its own rhythm. Meals revolve around vegetables, herbs, lentils, and goat's milk. all from the land itself. But the real secret is the attitude. People nap in the afternoon, eat lightly in the evening, and rarely dine alone. Food is medicine, but friendship is the prescription. Studies show that shared meals reduce mortality as much as exercise. Longevity here is social, not solitary. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, the diet is known as the Three Sisters: beans, corn, and squash, a trio that provides complete nutrition when combined. Fresh fruit, tropical roots, and clean water complete the picture. The people eat early in the day, work outdoors, and live close to family. Stress is low, purpose is high, and meals reflect both. Eating early in the day aligns with circadian rhythm, allowing digestion to rest while the body repairs. Even in Loma Linda, California, a rare pocket of longevity in the modern world, the pattern repeats. The Adventist community, known for plant-based diets, strong faith, and communal living, shows how belief and structure can extend life. Their food is whole, simple, unhurried, but their sense of belonging may matter even more. They eat with meaning, and meaning, it turns out, feeds cells as deeply as nutrients. Across these cultures, certain themes echo. They eat mostly plants, not out of ideology, but availability. They stop before fullness, not out of control, but contentment. They eat together, not out of obligation, but joy. They move naturally, walking, tending, lifting, living. And perhaps most importantly, they live with ikigai, purpose. Food is simply one thread in a tapestry of reason to wake up each morning. Modern nutrition often isolates these lessons. Eat more beans, add olive oil, practice intermittent fasting. But the magic is not in the parts, it's in the whole. Longevity grows from alignment, the gentle coherence of food, time, people, and peace. You can't bottle that. You can only live it. There's also an emotional intelligence to how these people eat. They don't chase health, they preserve gratitude. Meals are small celebrations, even in hardship. Gratitude itself lowers inflammation, slows heartbeat, and steadies metabolism. In that way, thankfulness literally adds years. In all these places, food is alive, grown nearby, prepared by hand, eaten with awareness. Processed foods are rare not by rule, but by disinterest. When you eat food that still remembers sunlight, you inherit its rhythm. That rhythm, steady and patient, is the real anti-aging secret. What's striking is how little fear surrounds food in these regions. There's no obsession, no guilt, no constant comparison. They trust their bodies because their culture taught them to. Contrast this with modern health anxiety, endless debates, conflicting studies, trend fatigue. In chasing the perfect diet, we've lost what they've kept: ease. Longevity isn't about restriction, it's about routine. It's not about adding years to life, but life to years. These people don't live longer because they fight death. They live longer because they accept life. They move with its rhythm instead of against it. To eat for longevity, then, is to live like time is your friend. Choose real food, eat with others, rest well, laugh often, stop early. It sounds simple, because it is. The body was designed for that simplicity. Complexity came later, with convenience and noise. If you listen closely, these cultures aren't teaching nutrition, they're teaching patience. Every few months, a new miracle food rises, promising energy, beauty, longevity, maybe even redemption. One year it's kale, then quinoa, then acai, then turmeric. Each arrives like a savior, draped in glossy magazine covers and glowing testimonials. This is it, they say. This is the one thing you've been missing. But the truth is simpler, quieter, and less profitable. No single food can fix a broken pattern. The idea of a superfood is comforting. It gives chaos a hero, confusion a cure. In a world flooded with choice, it offers certainty. But biology doesn't work that way. The body doesn't elevate ingredients to sainthood, it builds harmony from variety. You can't outsmart imbalance with a single symbol of purity. You can only restore rhythm, meal by meal, choice by choice. Superfoods are often ancient staples repackaged as modern miracles. Quinoa was once peasant grain in the Andes, turmeric a household spice in India, blueberries wild fruit in North America. People ate them not because they were super, but because they were available. Their strength came from context, the soil, the climate, the diversity of everything else on the plate. When those foods are lifted out of their ecosystems and turned into brands, they lose their quiet power and become performance. The marketing works because it sells identity, not nutrition. You don't just buy chia seeds, you buy wellness, discipline, virtue. Each superfood promises transformation, not just of the body, but of self-image. You imagine yourself becoming the kind of person who eats this. It's not entirely illusion. Intention does matter, but the problem lies in expectation. We look for magic in molecules instead of habits. There's also a hidden irony. Most superfoods are healthy only when eaten as part of a balanced pattern. Turmeric works best alongside black pepper and fat, which enhances its absorption. Quinoa provides amino acids, but only becomes complete when paired with vegetables or legumes. Even green tea's antioxidants function differently depending on diet and timing. Superfoods were never meant to stand alone. They evolved as players in an orchestra, not soloists. But the culture of quick fixes prefers singular heroes. It's easier to sell a powder than a pattern, easier to promise a glow than a discipline. So the industry extracts and isolates, a nutrient here, a chemical there, and sells it back in capsules and bars. In doing so, it strips away the complexity that made these foods powerful in the first place. The orange becomes vitamin C, the walnut becomes omega-3, the plant becomes product. This reductionism reflects our hunger for shortcuts. We don't want balance, we want rescue. But rescue doesn't come in spoons or sachets. It comes from repetition, from the boring, beautiful work of routine, cooking, chewing, resting, walking. Superfoods can support you, but they can't save you. No food can heal what lifestyle keeps breaking. Still, it's not all cynicism. Many so-called superfoods truly are nutrient-dense. Berries, nuts, seeds, greens, herbs. They offer antioxidants, minerals, healthy fats, but they are powerful only when they join a symphony of color, texture, and timing. The power isn't in the ingredient, it's in the pattern. Consider the Mediterranean diet, often called the healthiest in the world. Its strength doesn't come from olive oil or tomatoes alone, but from the harmony of both, plus whole grains, herbs, fish, moderate wine, social meals, sunlight, and rest. The same applies to traditional Asian or African cuisines. Balance, not excess. Simplicity, not spectacle. Longevity never grew from obsession. The psychology behind superfoods is just as revealing. When life feels uncertain, the promise of control, even through a smoothie, feels grounding. Buying health feels easier than building it. This is why superfoods succeed. They give hope, shape, and flavor. There's no shame in that. The act of caring for yourself, even symbolically, still holds value. But true care begins where marketing ends, in honesty, consistency, and calm. The body doesn't need superfoods. It needs super habits. Regular meals, good sleep, steady hydration, gentle movement, social connection, emotional peace, these outperform any exotic berry. No nutrient works in isolation, neither do you. Your chemistry is a network, not a chart. A handful of kale can't balance a life lived in stress, and no powder can replace presence. When you zoom out, the illusion of superfoods dissolves into a larger truth. Every culture has its version of them. To the Japanese, it's green tea. To the Greeks, olive oil. To the Indians, ghee and turmeric. To the Inuit, fish rich in omega-3s. What's common among them isn't the ingredient, but the intention, reverence, moderation, continuity. They eat these foods daily, without worship. We, meanwhile, consume them occasionally with drama. So perhaps the goal isn't to reject superfoods, but to return them to their rightful place. Humble helpers, not holy relics. Enjoy your blueberries, your matcha, your flax seeds, but remember they're pieces, not puzzles. The real superfood is the pattern that sustains you, the meal that's shared, the routine that doesn't need hashtags. Because what truly heals is not found in rarity, but in rhythm. The body doesn't crave magic, it craves memory. The memory of being cared for regularly, not a In a world that rushes, eating has become background noise. Something we do while working, scrolling, talking, driving, thinking of what's next. The meal is there, but we are not. We chew but don't taste. We swallow but don't sense. And somewhere between speed and distraction, the body stops trusting us. It doesn't know when hunger begins or fullness ends. It only knows that it's being ignored. Mindful and intuitive eating are not diets. They are the art of remembering, the art of coming back to the table as if it were the first time. They ask nothing complicated, only presence. To pause, to look, to breathe before the first bite, to see food not as fuel or reward, but as conversation, because every meal is a dialogue between body and mind, and awareness is the language they both understand. Mindful eating begins before the plate. It starts with a question: why am I eating right now? Hunger, boredom, habit, emotion. All are valid reasons, but knowing which one guides your choice changes everything. You stop reacting and start responding. You eat not automatically, but intentionally. When you sit down to eat, attention becomes the ingredient that transforms everything else. Notice the colors, the scent, the warmth of the plate. Take a single breath before beginning. It resets the nervous system, shifting you from fight or flight to rest and digest. Your body needs that signal to process food properly. Without it, even healthy meals become stress meals. Intuitive eating goes one step deeper. It's not just about awareness in the moment, but about trust over time. It's the practice of listening to the body's cues, hunger, satisfaction, craving, fatigue, and responding with respect, not control. It rejects the idea that an app or chart knows better than your own biology. It says your body is not your enemy. It knows when to eat, what to eat, and when to stop, if only you let it speak. But trust takes practice, especially after years of rules and guilt. Many people no longer feel real hunger. They feel only habit. Rebuilding that connection means quieting external noise, calorie charts, social media advice, moral labels, and learning the texture of your own signals again. Gentle hunger feels like curiosity. Emotional hunger feels like urgency. Fullness feels like comfort, not pressure. The difference is subtle, but awareness reveals it. When you eat mindfully, food changes flavor. A strawberry tastes like a strawberry again. The crunch of bread, the bitterness of greens, the sweetness of fruit all become experiences instead of background static. You eat slower, not because you're trying to, but because you finally notice. Digestion improves, appetite steadies, and satisfaction returns, not from volume, but from attention. This way of eating also softens the mind. When you stop multitasking through meals, anxiety drops. The body feels seen, and in that recognition, safety blooms. Safety lowers cortisol, improves nutrient absorption, and steadies hormones. In short, mindful eating turns food into medicine, not through ingredients, but through awareness itself. Intuitive eating, meanwhile, helps dissolve guilt. There are no good or bad foods, only foods that feel good or bad for you right now. Sometimes salad, sometimes soup, sometimes chocolate. The goal is flexibility, not perfection. You begin to see food as rhythm, not rule. You can enjoy the celebration without fearing the aftermath, because balance always follows awareness. There's an old Zen saying, "When you eat, just eat." It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. It means allowing the act to be whole, uninterrupted. No phone, no rush, no distraction. When you give one thing your full attention, the mind quiets. In that stillness, gratitude emerges naturally, not forced, but felt. Gratitude itself has measurable effects. It slows heart rate, relaxes digestion, and deepens satisfaction. To practice mindful eating is to practice humility. It's to realize how many lives, hands, and elements made this meal possible. The farmer, the soil, the rain, the sun. Eating becomes an act of participation in the cycle of life, not consumption of it. You stop eating to escape the world and start eating to belong to it again. This simplicity also rewires the modern obsession with fixing the body. When you listen closely, the body stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts feeling like a partner to care for. Hunger no longer feels threatening. Fullness no longer feels failure. They're simply signals, as natural as breath. If you've lived for years measuring and controlling, mindfulness may feel foreign at first, but it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to begin. Try one meal without screens. Try chewing slowly enough to notice flavor change. Try putting the fork down between bites. Each act of presence rewires both brain and body toward trust. You'll find that overeating often fades when attention returns. The body doesn't need more food, it needs more awareness. Most excess comes from absence. When you're there, fully, the body knows when to stop. In truth, mindful and intuitive eating are less about what's on the plate and more about how you show up for it. They are acts of self-relationship. When you approach food without judgment, you heal more than appetite. You heal attention. At some point, food stops being just food. It becomes a reflection of how you live, how you cope, and how you care. It mirrors your beliefs about balance, discipline, pleasure, and worth. For most of us, that mirror has cracked, splintered by years of rules, guilt, and noise. To rebuild it is to return not just to eating, but to meaning. A personal philosophy of food is not a diet, not a list of rules, not a quest for purity. It's a compass, a way of remembering what food truly is: relationship between body and mind, hunger and satisfaction, pleasure and peace. It's how you reconcile control with joy, nourishment with freedom. For too long, control has worn the mask of health. We count, weigh, and restrict in the name of discipline. We measure success by what we resist instead of what we enjoy. But control without compassion eventually collapses. It isolates, it drains life of color. A true philosophy must hold both awareness and allowance, structure and softness. The first step is clarity. What do you want food to mean in your life? Comfort, celebration, energy, connection. Once you answer that honestly, the path begins to form. Because if food is comfort, it should comfort you, not hurt you. If it's energy, it should sustain, not exhaust. If it's connection, it should bring people closer, not apart. Food only loses its balance when its meaning and use drift apart. Harmony begins where fear ends. To rebuild your relationship with food, you must forgive it and yourself. All the years of good and bad, on track and off track, they taught vigilance, but not peace. Letting go of that moral language doesn't make you careless, it makes you honest. You stop eating for image and start eating for integrity. Nourishment, joy, and control can coexist, but not as opposites. Think of them as a triangle. Each one stabilizes the others. Nourishment without joy feels like duty. Joy without nourishment burns too fast. Control without either feels like exile. The goal is not balance every day, but balance over time, a rhythm that forgives variation. Begin with nourishment, the biological foundation. Feed your body regularly and reliably. Choose foods that leave you calm, not heavy, alert, not anxious. Notice how you feel after, not just during. Energy is the body's language of approval. Then welcome joy, the emotional dimension. Eat meals you genuinely love. Celebrate flavor, texture, memory. Eat with people who make you laugh, in places that make you breathe. Joy isn't indulgence, it's alignment. When food brings happiness without harm, it's serving its purpose. Finally, redefine control, not as restriction, but as rhythm. It's the gentle structure that keeps you grounded, eating at steady times, listening to real hunger, stopping at comfort, not compulsion. Control means self-respect, not self-denial. The philosophy you build must fit the life you live. A traveler eats differently than a farmer, a parent differently than a student, a young athlete differently than an aging artist. The point isn't to follow someone else's ideal, but to write your own, one flexible enough to evolve with you. Culture, emotion, and biology all influence how we eat. A healthy philosophy honors all three. It recognizes that food is not just nutrients, it's story. Every bite carries ancestry, economy, ecology, and identity. To eat consciously is to live consciously. Small rituals can anchor this philosophy. Sit before eating. Take one deep breath. Express quiet gratitude, not just for the food, but for your ability to taste, smell and feel. Eat from real plates. Turn off screens. These small acts signal to the body, this matters. As you refine your relationship with food, clarity emerges. You begin to trust your hunger, respect your fullness, and choose not from fear, but from peace. You start asking different questions, not what should I eat, but what do I need? Not am I allowed, but will this help me feel alive? When nourishment, joy, and control finally move in harmony, eating becomes effortless again. Meals feel whole, not weighed. Guilt dissolves into gratitude. You stop chasing healthy and start living it. Because the deepest truth is this: food is not a battle to win, it's a rhythm to remember. Once you return to that rhythm, steady, kind, curious, every meal becomes both nourishment and meditation. And in that simplicity, you find what the world's longest-lived cultures already know, that health is not built in struggle, but in ease, and that perhaps the greatest luxury in modern life is not more choice, but calm enough to choose well. Health was once a quiet thing. It lived in motion, in sleep, in laughter, in work done with purpose. But somewhere along the way, it became performance, a series of numbers, photos, and measurements. We turned wellness into an identity, the body into a project, and peace into a reward we never quite reached. The modern definition of health became narrow and exhausting, a finish line that kept moving. But the truth is simpler, kinder, and more human. Health is not about chasing control, it's about reclaiming freedom. It's not a perfect body, it's a peaceful one. It's not measured by appearance, but by aliveness. When you wake with steadiness, when your thoughts feel clear, when your appetite feels honest, when you feel at home inside your skin, that is health. The world has taught us to measure health by subtraction: fewer calories, fewer pounds, fewer wrinkles. But real health begins with addition: more energy, more calm, more connection, more ease. It's not about what you remove, but what you restore. Energy is the first layer. It's the quiet hum beneath everything you do. Not the jitter of caffeine or the rush of adrenaline, but steady vitality, the kind that carries you without force. Energy is built from rhythm: eating real food, sleeping deeply, moving daily, and resting without guilt. It's not something you earn, it's something you preserve. The healthiest people aren't the busiest, they're the ones who know when to stop. Peace is the second layer. It's the stillness that comes when food stops being war, when you no longer punish yourself for craving or praise yourself for restraint. Peace lives in the middle ground, where hunger is just hunger, not judgment, where fullness is satisfaction, not failure. It's the moment you sit down to eat and realize there's no tension in your shoulders, no calculation in your mind, only presence. And then there is freedom, the final and rarest form of health. Freedom means walking through the world without being ruled by fear, of food, of weight, of imperfection. It's understanding that your body isn't an obstacle to overcome, it's the vehicle that lets you live. Freedom doesn't mean neglect, it means trust. You care for your body not to change it, but to honor it. You feed it well, move it kindly, and rest it fully, not for outcome, but for gratitude. This is the shift, from chasing to listening, from fighting to cooperating. The new definition of health isn't about becoming someone else, it's about returning to yourself. Science now supports what wisdom always knew: balance outlasts extremes. The centenarians of Okinawa, the gardeners of Ikaria, the walkers of Sardinia, they all share one thing in common. They live in rhythm. They eat real food, move naturally, laugh often, sleep deeply, belong somewhere. None of them diet, none of them count. They simply live in alignment with their nature. That alignment, not perfection, is the secret to longevity. True health also includes the invisible, mental, emotional, and social wellness. Connection matters as much as nutrition. A meal shared is metabolized differently than a meal eaten in loneliness. Laughter lowers stress hormones. Kindness steadies the heart. Gratitude changes chemistry. The body listens to everything the mind says, and it answers. So where do we go from here? Perhaps we stop searching for the next plan and start returning to the old wisdom: rhythm, rest, and relationship. Perhaps we eat slowly again, sleep when we're tired, move because it feels good. Perhaps we stop trying to fix the body and start trying to hear it, because health is not a trophy, it's a home, and the goal is not to perfect it, but to live comfortably inside it. The new definition of health is this: to have energy that feels steady, to have peace that feels natural, to have freedom that feels deserved. It's waking up each day without war inside you. It's eating without guilt, moving without punishment, resting without apology. It's knowing that your body is not your enemy, it's your oldest friend. And when you live that way, everything changes quietly. Food becomes joy again. Movement becomes gratitude. Rest becomes permission. You stop chasing the illusion of health and start inhabiting it. Because health was never about control, it was about belonging to your body, to your rhythm, to life itself. And that, finally, is freedom.